Nonprofits. The sector doubled almost every decade, exponentially. Not quite, but almost exponentially. Exponentially grew. And there's a lot of talk about how many nonprofits can a nation really support. You know, and what do we do? We are 10% of the workforce. 10% of people who work here in Detroit, here in Michigan, as well as in the nation, work for nonprofits. And we've been one of the most stable places for people to work. Far fewer people have lost their jobs who worked in the not-for-profit sector than in the for-profit sector. And probably some of you know that because you have these people that call you and they'll say, oh, you know, I'm looking for work and I've decided to give back and I want something that, you know, really meets my heart needs and my conscience needs and not just my money. And you're sort of like, oh, you lost your job. And now you've got a big change of heart. So, not to be really rude, but anyway, so we're just a huge sector. And yet at the same time, these tax cuts that we talked about earlier have really disproportionately affected nonprofits. We've been asked to do really essentially more and more with less and less, especially human service agencies. Yesterday I was with a bunch of people, a bunch of food pantry gleaners convened, I don't know, 50 people there from all these different food pantries, some from churches, some that were, you know, like the Captain of the Soup Kitchen where Lisa works and so on. And, you know, they were reporting like 100% increase in need for service, 50% increase, these massive numbers of people coming. And the other thing they were kind of, a few people were reporting is that people are getting more, they're so frightened about food, about having enough to eat, that they're hoarding food. Like they come and they take as much as they can, just instead of taking what they need for that week or something, they take as much as they can. And so, you know, the frame, somebody was saying where they put out a lot of vegetables, I guess, that are free. People kind of swoop in and grab all the, you know, like all the green peppers and take them home. And it was kind of interesting, like they're kind of frightened. And so food pantries are having to deal with that a little bit more, that kind of hoarding, which is a very interesting, and it's really, you know, it really speaks to people's fear, but the massive amount of food that they, more food that they need. And then what was sort of interesting to me in that, just in that arena around food and kind of coming off of what Lisa was talking about earlier, is how, you know, these food pantries in some ways they rely on a lot of different things, but one thing they rely on is donated food. So you've had some of these corporations, for example, Tyson Corporation, giving away massive amounts of food, very generous, giving away massive amounts of food, and then having it redistributed. But when we really think about it, Tyson is one of the most foul corporations on the face of the earth. And very good. Very good. You know, I mean, some of you remember their plant in North Carolina where they had locked the door so people couldn't take a break or go to the bathroom or have a cigarette, and then the plant caught on fire and people couldn't get out, they were burned to death. And so here's a company that burned its workers. I mean, you know, set up a situation where the workers were burned to death, was now providing food for unemployed workers. There's a certain irony in that, and the degree to which these food pantries were grappling with that, obviously wasn't part of the topic of yesterday. But I think that's that would be an example of a dilemma you'd really be put in, where you need the food, okay? But are you really going to dignify the actions of this corporation by taking it? What good does it do to turn it away? So these are the kind of some dilemmas that we're in. I wonder when let me say how nonprofits are part of the commons. You know, do you agree with that? That nonprofits should be part of the commons?
I would say yes.
Okay, why would you say that, Lottie?
Because, well, especially with 501c3s, the dollars that are going in are public dollars, and therefore it's our duty to use those dollars toward the common good, the greater good of the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have an obligation because we are public charities, and I don't mean charity in the sense of charity, but it just as a description of what we are, public charity, especially those of us who have this status, 501c3. Okay, we have enormous tax benefits for existing, right? I mean, we don't pay income tax, which is very different from how corporations are supposed to be. In fact, a lot of corporations don't pay income tax either, but they're supposed to. Gifts are tax deductible. Gifts to us, people can deduct from their taxes. If we own property, we don't have to pay property tax, like a church or something. Like in Berkeley, where I live, Berkeley, California, 40% of the property in the city of Berkeley is tax exempt. And that's not roads and stuff like that. That's actually places where buildings are. This is the university. There's some big hospitals. There's a lot of churches and libraries and so on. So that's an enormous kind of thing. We have access to money that a small business doesn't have. We have access to foundations and government that wouldn't give money to groups, to individuals or to businesses. So we exist for the public. Our records, our 990s, all our financial dealings are supposed to be transparent. They're supposed to be in the public. So that's one reason why we're in the Commons, because we exist to serve the public. Why else would a nonprofit be in the Commons, as far as you agreed with that?
A lot of work being done in nonprofits is not being done for pay.
Yes. Okay. So second reason is that work isn't done for pay, or it's done for very low pay sometimes, or the people who benefit from it aren't paying for it. It's paid for some other way. Or we have a lot of volunteers who do things strictly for free. So profit isn't, that's why we're called non-profits. Profit isn't our motive. And this is a big thing, you know, in the late 90s especially, there was a lot of talk for nonprofits. What can nonprofits learn from business? And there were a lot of business school programs and a lot of, and some of you may have gone to them. There's this wonderful book called Small Change, Why Business Won't Save the World, which is an analysis of all these efforts. Some of which came into Detroit. People came into Detroit to try to help with social venture and philanthrocapitalism and stuff like that. So we might be familiar with some of that. And the notion was nonprofits can learn a lot from business. Well, probably we can learn from business. I'm not against that. But the question was never asked in reverse: what can business learn from nonprofits? Because the idea was nothing. Because you guys don't know anything. And I think what's sort of funny is now that question has kind of faded away. And the reason is because who's still here? We are. They're not. Business. You know, one thing they could learn from us is how to survive in a very tough environment, how to get people to work for free. So, why else is nonprofit in the Commons? Go ahead.
I have a question, so finish that.
No, tell me your question.
Well, I have a problem with being a nonprofit, and I became aware of it maybe 20 years ago. Part of it is, I mean, I appreciate what you have there, but I think the other part is that it's a very, maybe oppressive is too strong a word, but a lot of what the culture, which is totally against the common, different from the commons, is applied, and we're expected to, we're acting out of that. It's permeated, just like it has permeated my individual life. And it is, to me, coming from a point of scarcity rather than abundance. So when you ask the question, how are they part of the commons, I think something happened in my brain that went, and my heart. Just to put it out there, I'm not sure if I'm making myself clear. No.
It really actually just moved nicely to the next thing, and we can just kind of go back and forth. In what ways are nonprofits themselves guilty of enclosure without needing to be? And I think that's what you're kind of a little indicating. I mean, partly because we can't help it. We are as much, all of us, the 10% of people who work for nonprofits are just as much affected by our current way of life as anyone who doesn't. But there may be some other ways that we're also part of an enclosure, that we struggle between these two things.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of times nonprofits provide, and often privately, the services that otherwise either government would have to provide or whose lack would otherwise lead people to rise up and demand a different system. So, I mean, someone introduced me not that long ago to a term that many of you may know, dirty workers. And he said that, like, social workers and teachers in this strain, and I don't know who invented it, some leftist.
What's it called? Dirty workers?
Dirty workers. He said that whoever this leftist was that conceived this like 30, 40 years ago, just said that the dirty work of society is the people whose daily job it is to interact with those who are most unempowered and disenfranchised, have the responsibility of giving them just enough of the society's wealth to keep them pacified and to keep them from demanding more.
Yeah.
And in many regards, that's what we nonprofits accomplish.
No, I mean, this is definitely a part of the enclosure, and it's built into our history. If you look at